From a defabricated solar-powered garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominick. On today's episode, keeping your jacket hood over your head during heavy rain and wind while also hiding those creepy face tattoos. And now, the podcast host who has no worries for such things because his face tattoos have been removed with surgery-like precision, Pete Dominick!
Thank you very much, Pete Co, for always seeing me and speaking my truth right here at the beginning of the show. I knew I wanted to get rid of my face tattoos. When I saw another guy with a face tattoo in the subway, and I was looking at him, and I was like, he's looking at me, and I was like, oh man, I can't believe this guy has a face tattoo as well. And he was like, what are you looking at? I'm like, what do you think I'm looking at? You got a tattoo on your face. Ridiculous. Anyway, glad I got rid of mine. Thank you for recognizing that, Pico. Got a hell of a show for you today. 2 big-time guests, 2 big-time brains. Glenn Kirschner joins me to talk about the latest with Trump's legal matters, and I speak with the brilliant Dave Rothkopf about the 20th year in Afghanistan, the coverage it's not getting, the more important stories, and so much more. I think you're going to love both these conversations. I know you are going to. I can't do them without your support. So sign up for a paid subscription right now. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominick right now. Okay. Wow. How about it, folks? Happy Wednesday to you. First of all, sorry that yesterday I told you that we would be hanging out tomorrow, meaning today. I didn't mean to confuse many of you. They thought I had changed the hangout. I didn't know what day it was. Today is the Wednesday show. It's show number 804. And tomorrow night, we will hang out. Tomorrow night. Sorry about that. Always Thursday at 8, unless otherwise changed. My friend Kara O'Connor out there now in Michigan, she wants to do a brunch hangout, and we'll have Bloody Marys. I kind of like that idea as well. Well, I hope you had a good yesterday, and here we are in the middle of the week. I spent all day, as much as I could, outside yesterday, and still got both these great guests on the show today, but I moved seedlings to larger pots. I've got all kinds of spinach and basil and kale and lettuces growing. Very excited about that. Listen to some terrifying podcasts about AI and prepared for my conversations with both Glenn Kirschner and Dave Rothkopf. But before I get to them, a couple of things I just want to mention and play for you from the news yesterday. First of all, I thought this was great. Here is a caller on C-SPAN, a caller from Kentucky called in the C-SPAN because they had on C-SPAN's Washington Journal, they're taking calls on whether an indictment would help or hurt Donald Trump in 2024. I like this call.
Your thoughts on this question. Would an indictment help or hurt Donald Trump?
It doesn't matter because President Trump is our salvation. And I'd like to ask the question, what is the intent to entrap law? To me, it seems like they're attacking this man nonstop from the first time he stepped off the plane. And it's overwhelming, ugly.
All right. Well, so was your phone call and your terrible connection. But I thought I would share that. Some folks out there watching C-SPAN thought that was interesting. And, of course, you heard Trump's own lawyer. I'm sure you've seen this clip. I'm going to play it anyway. His own lawyer panning his hush money payments as illegal and fraudulent to our friend Laura Coates in 2018 CNN appearance. Did you see this yesterday? This is Trump's attorney, Joseph Tacopina, giving a shockingly different point of view from what he's been saying lately.
Ukraine, I mean, once that net is out, once the microscope is on you, everything is fair game. And it's hard to argue, oh, you can't look at this or you can't look at that. So, yes, if there's an issue with that payment to Stormy Daniels being that it was made on behalf of the candidate, okay, and it was not declared, that's fair game, unfortunately, if that's the case. And, quite frankly, Michael Cohen, again, has made statements that would give rise to suspicion for any prosecutor to say, That doesn't make sense, that a lawyer took out a home equity loan with his own money, paid somebody that he didn't even know on behalf of a client who, by the way, had the wherewithal and the money to afford $130,000. Yeah. And by the way, didn't tell the client about the settlement agreement. It's an illegal agreement. It's a fraud. If that's in fact the case, the straight face test. And quite frankly, if that is what happened, we have a potential campaign finance issue.
So that's just amazing. Just amazing that the guy who's arguing for President Trump, defending Trump on this case, made the case for the crime. It's almost exactly what Glenn Kirschner says when I talked to him today. So stay tuned for that. Now, here are the Good Liars. This is one of the guys from the Good Liars. They're this like liberal comedians, and they go out and do man on the street interviews and infiltrate Trump rallies and so on. Anyway, yesterday they were able to do a live interview on a right-wing TV channel at the New York rally for Trump, and this is pretty good.
I think like this is a political prosecution. It has to be, right? Like that's the only way it could be happening right now is if they're going after him politically. The only other option is that Donald Trump lost by 7 million votes and is a loser who can't deal with the fact that he lost the election because he based his whole personality on being a winner and calling people losers.
You think his attitude, his approach, his personality is what
is what got us in this mess in the first place, potentially? Or I'm just going to choose to believe that the election was stolen and everything that he says, because I kind of like base my whole personality on supporting Donald Trump, so I'm not going to maybe accept the option.
Oh, that was just wonderful. They were live on this right-wing news channel, and he really did a number on him. Ari Melber last night on MSNBC. Weird that Trump's lawyers keep going on TV with him. So one of Trump's lawyers who was trying to quash the motion, this case in Georgia, because that one juror, that weird juror, came out and talked too much. Well, he's trying to throw the whole case out, the one where President Trump wanted the Georgia Secretary of State to just find a few votes. Anyway, listen to this 2 minutes with his lawyer and Ari Melber from last night on MSNBC.
Do you acknowledge that Donald Trump lost? But that's what I stay focused on.
Do you acknowledge that Donald Trump lost the Georgia election?
I am.
That's an easy one. Do you acknowledge that, attorney? Drew?
No. I'm focused. Let me tell you what I'm focused on. I'm focused on being a criminal defense attorney and seeing that my client is being swept up in what has, to me, been a ridiculous circus atmosphere, special purpose grand jury.
No, and you made that point, but
not only in this case, but on other cases.
You made that point, but do you acknowledge?
I'm not going to sit there.
Do you acknowledge? Do you acknowledge that he lost the state of Georgia?
You can talk to other political people. Why would we even talk about that? What does that have to do? What does it have to do with me defending President Trump in this matter? It has zero to do with it.
I appreciate it. All right, you've raised a rhetorical question. What does it have to do? Let's listen to Donald Trump lying to people, some of whom later committed crimes, some of whom other Republicans committed the potential crime of misleading the government about who were the duly stated electors of Georgia, which, of course, the current president, President Biden, won. Here's Donald Trump talking about Georgia. Take a listen.
You know, we won Georgia, just so you understand. They cheated and they rigged our presidential election, but we will still win it.
That was December 2020. That was a lie, and it was, in concert with these other things, a lie that induced these people to submit this elector fraud, which may or may not be charged, and which, as of January 6th, they were trying to bring some of that in different states, not Georgia, by the way, to the floor of the Senate that was been uncovered. So again, I want to give you one more chance on that. When you say you don't know why it's relevant, that's, to me, the most charitable way I can put it, Drew, is that's confusing, because what's relevant is the entire point that he lost the election and got people to submit false material to the government and everywhere else, or conspire to do so. And that's a potential crime.
Now, so Ari, let me tell you, because what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to be a hypocrite and I'm not going to be disingenuous.
Mm-hmm. Oh, too late. All right. Well, that's that. I thought that was a pretty interesting handling of that dumb lawyer who I think looks like Count Chocula. I don't even care his name. He's going to be here and gone. And so why even learn it? Terrible. All right. Also, just want to mention that on Tuesday, the president, Joe Biden, he's the actual president, he won. He officially designated a new national monument in southern Nevada, or is it Nevada, while speaking at a conservation event and the Interior Department. More than 506,000 acres, the Aviqua Ame National Monument is one of the largest tracts of land to come under federal protection so far during Biden's presidency, preserving Nevada's Spirit Mountain and the desert around it. Biden's proclamation, a major victory of the surrounding Fort Mojave Indian tribe, which has been advocating for the monument's creation for around 3 decades. So very, very big deal. Yesterday, the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, who is a Native American herself, gave a very emotional speech. Also, I mentioned this with Glenn Kirschner, 6 additional Oath Keepers, members and affiliates found guilty of charges related to the Capitol breach yesterday. And I know there's a big storm out there in California, so I hope you guys are all right. Just want to tell you, I'm thinking of all the West Coast listeners. Love you guys, and I hope to see you and hear about it tomorrow night at the Hangout. All right, that is all of the news I've got for you. Now it's time to get to both of my very special guests. You can listen to my conversation with David Rothkopf coming up at 34 minutes in, and it's really good. It's always good. I really enjoyed it. I loved it. I learned so much from him. He was righteous, very righteous and accurate, and a lot of good rips. I think you're going to love that. So you can jump to that if you're more interested in foreign policy, though we do talk a little bit about Trump's legal woes. But first, we get to former federal prosecutor, my old friend from our MSNBC days. He's still, of course, a regular contributor there. You can see him there all the time. Check out his new website that DJ Monzek created, a longtime listener. I referred him to it, to Glenn, and it's great. GlennKirschner.com. Justice Matters with Glenn Kirschner. Watch and subscribe to his YouTube page. Follow him, of course, on Twitter. And I can't say enough good things about this guy. He was 30 years as a prosecutor, argued to juries, connected legal dots, and he brings that approach to his analysis of everything that we're talking about today. So let's get to it right now. It's time for the Kirschner Report. Glenn Kirschner joins us now. All right, I've got Glenn Kirschner now. He's very busy. Thank you for squeezing me in. A lot to talk with you about. You probably aren't sleeping. Are you just going on everybody's shows?
Yeah, Justice never sleeps, but it tries to grab a cat nap every once in a while. So, yeah, we've been busy.
So, first and foremost, we were supposed to see an indictment today because Donald Trump said there was going to be one. I don't know how closely you read the reporting. Even his lawyers said that they hadn't heard anything from the court. And though the NYPD was getting ready, and it just seemed like we were watching his plane. What did we miss?
Yeah, and not a good sign when your lawyers say, well, you know what, our client's kind of full of you know what. So listen, we're not going to rely on anything Donald Trump says about, what's going to happen to him. I have said all along, I will believe the New York District Attorney indicts Donald Trump when I've printed out a hard copy of the indictment and I'm holding it in my hands, reading it for myself. But listen, all indicators are Bragg is going to indict him. Fani Willis, the latest reporting is she's putting the finishing touches on an indictment that may include racketeering and conspiracy charges. And then nice development today in the civil fraud case that Tish James brought against him. Judge Engeron, the presiding judge, who is a no-nonsense kind of judge, said, the October trial date is set in stone, period. So, I think we're about to hit potentially the trifecta of justice with Tish James, D.A. Willis, Alvin Bragg. I think those three will go down in history if they follow through and they all, bring the cases that it looks like they're going to bring.
And you haven't even mentioned the federal government, Department of Justice Special Prosecutor Jack Smith and the 2 investigations he's doing into both January 6th and the classified documents. And there's news on that from ABC News. Special counsel claims Trump deliberately misled his attorneys about classified documents. And they're saying that prosecutors in the special counsel's office have presented compelling preliminary evidence that former President Donald Trump knowingly and deliberately misled his own attorneys about his retention of classified documents after leaving office. And that's according to a former federal judge and a Friday in a sealed filing. Anyway, later on in this article, it goes on to say the judge made it clear that prosecutors would still need to meet a higher standard of evidence in order to seek charges against Trump, and even more still to prove his guilt beyond reasonable doubt. So I wonder if the headline's a little hype late here on Tuesday night.
You know, it's a little bit of hype. Of course, it's a natural extension, Pete, of what we already know, which is that the chief judge ordered Trump's attorney, Evan Corcoran, to testify because the attorney-client privilege evaporated. It fell because of the crime fraud exception, which means there was definitely some fraud, some crime going on between Donald Trump and his attorney. Now, let me hasten to add, I used to work with Evan Corcoran, who has fallen a long way representing Trump and finding himself jammed up the way he is. But when the crime fraud exception applies, it means one of two things. It means either Donald Trump was wittingly and knowingly including his attorney, Evan Corcoran, in his Donald Trump's crimes, or Donald Trump was using him unwittingly in furtherance of his Donald Trump's crimes. I'm not defending Evan Corcoran. I'm just saying we can't leap to the conclusion, because we don't know yet, whether Evan Corcoran was criminally involved with Trump or was being used unwittingly by Trump to do his criminal bidding.
You ever think, you just made me think now about Evan Corcoran, about how many people have been laid waste by this man. Michael Cohen went to jail for him. Alan Weisselberg's in jail for him. You could even get to his personal life, his wives and what they went through, much less many of his cabinet secretaries, and how all of their reputations were so damaged, maybe never enough. It's just everything he touches dies. Who said that? Rick Wilson?
Yeah. Everything Trump touches dies.
Let me come back to Manhattan. One thing that you're hearing a lot of, and I know you had a great YouTube video on Republicans wanting to investigate Alvin Bragg's really interesting video about that. We can get to, hopefully, if we have a minute here. But you're hearing Rand Paul and Ron DeSantis and Kevin McCarthy and everybody else say the same thing about the Manhattan District Attorney. Trump saying it too. Why is he wasting time pursuing the president? And the meantime, violence is running rampant all around New York. The easy way to see that is if you know anything about what the job of the DA in Manhattan or anywhere else is, they pursue white-collar criminals. They pursue all kinds of other criminals as well. They have divisions and lawyers and prosecutors and police officers. It's a big operation. But what do you say when they all say that?
I say Donald Trump committed some pretty significant crimes as a private citizen in 2016. He was in a conspiracy with at least Michael Cohen. We don't know if Weisselberg was involved, nor do we know, Pete, exactly what incriminating evidence Weisselberg has provided to Alvin Bragg about it. We don't know if David Pecker was involved, the National Enquirer guy. We don't know what evidence he provided, right? But Michael Cohen was Donald Trump's co-conspirator. Michael Cohen was convicted of the crime, went to prison for the crime, and is now cooperating with the authorities. Donald Trump committed the same crimes. In fact, Michael Cohen committed them at the direction of and for the benefit of Donald Trump. So in a very real sense, Donald Trump is even more culpable because he reaped the benefit of the crimes. Donald Trump is again a private citizen, and Alvin Bragg is prosecuting him, the other half of the conspiracy, for the same crimes. Why wouldn't those cases be prosecuted? Not prosecuting them is frankly unjust, because half of the conspiracy has gone to prison for them, and now it's Donald Trump's turn.
By the way, on this case about the hush money case of Stormy Daniels, I forgot there's audio tape of Michael Cohen talking with Donald Trump about it. Joy Reid played it the other night. You were on commenting about it.
And here it is for everybody else as a reminder.
We need to open up a company for the transfer of all of that info regarding our friend David. I spoke to Alan about it when it comes time for the financing, which will be...
Listen, what financing?
We'll have to pay you. So, no.
Why is this such a big, bad crime that needs to be prosecuted?
Well, because it's not just falsifying business records. It's not just hush money payments. There are violations of New York campaign finance laws. There are violations of tax laws, because what did they do? Donald Trump took these hush money payments as business deductions because they were legal expenses. There is a conspiracy, and a conspiracy to commit a crime is a separate crime. If you and I conspire to rob a bank, Pete, and we take a couple of steps, you steal a car, I buy a gun, and then we say, you know what? Stupid idea. Let's abandon. We've already committed the crime of conspiracy to commit bank robbery, even if we abandon. So there are multiple crimes that were committed as a result of these hush money payments. So, yeah, it kind of matters, right? It kind of matters. Half of the conspiracy has been held accountable. Time to hold the other half accountable.
Well, I just think that we have so few campaign finance laws that really are effective. It's been a huge problem for our country and at the state level as well for forever. I've been talking about it with experts forever, but you would think that one law you would have to keep is that you can't pay someone to be quiet during your campaign because it could damage your campaign. I think laws like that for any election, for any nation or state are important, and there needs to be a precedent that we prosecute people, and there is. I mean, John Edwards, these aren't identical situations. People keep saying they are, but there is precedent for this. Why is it important by that level?
Well, look, there were similar crimes allegedly committed by John Edwards, right? He was running for president. He was trying to bury deeply damaging information. And who of all people prosecuted him but Jack Smith's team? Because he said, Jack Smith, I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're a Democrat. He's prosecuted both, some successfully, some unsuccessfully, which I like. Give me a prosecutor who's brought the hard case and lost, trying to get after public corruption. That's the kind of guy I want to work with. So, yeah, it is important because if politicians can go around paying off everybody who has damaging information that would hurt their candidacy, you know what they're doing? They're robbing us of the value of our vote. That's what they're doing. And it's illegal. Not everybody is George Santos who can just run around lying about everything, right, and get elected. If you're paying off people to keep their mouths shut so we don't know who we're voting for, that kind of undermines democracy.
All right. So are you do you think, by the way, there's going to be, I mean, how sure are you at this point that there'll be an indictment? Is it, I feel like we are on, I haven't been speculating about it or really talking about it because I just want to wait till it happens. But I don't know if I should even ask you about it if it's maybe not going to happen.
Yeah. So I have heard lots of questions in recent days by hosts and anchors. Is it possible that the grand jury will not indict? The answer is, of course. Metaphysically, anything's possible. Every sign I've seen as a former career prosecutor tells me that indictments are almost a certainty, but not a certainty, right? Listen, the grand jury could take a left turn somewhere and say, we don't quite think we have probable cause to believe Donald Trump committed crimes, so we're not going to vote to indict him. That's a possibility. I think it's very unlikely. Alvin Bragg at the last minute could pull the plug and actually decide not to ask the grand jury for a vote. That's a possibility, not a likelihood. And, the strongest indicator, Pete, that they're absolutely moving toward indictments is when they invited Donald Trump to testify. We don't invite the target of the grand jury investigation to appear and explain himself and try to talk his way out of an indictment unless we are determined to indict as the next step. Everything I've seen indicates he's about to be indicted.
All right, I'll indulge, and you're the guy I want to describe. What does it mean if he gets indicted? Just tell us what we're likely to see or hear. Apparently, he wants to be perp walked and wants to be handcuffed. I know you don't like that. You've never liked the perp walk, right?
No, I think we should be above the perp walk. Now, let me say, after Donald Trump has been, abusing and victimizing the American people ever since 2016, I am hard pressed to say people shouldn't feel enormous satisfaction at Donald Trump finally being charged with at least some of his crimes. I don't think it's a celebratory affair. And I think maybe we should be above it as a government, parading people around, because an indictment, Pete, is only an allegation. It's a formal way to bring a charge against somebody. And judges every day in every jurisdiction instruct juries that, ladies and gentlemen, you know that the defendant has been indicted. I am instructing you An indictment is not evidence of guilt. It's nothing more than the formal vehicle to bring somebody into court to defend against an allegation, and you must presume him innocent unless and until the evidence proves his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I've heard that in my sleep. I've heard it so many times by judges. So it is nothing more than a formal allegation that you've committed crimes and you have to stand trial for those crimes. But it's a finding by 16 to 23 members of the public, that's how many people sit on a grand jury, that there is in fact proof by probable cause that Donald Trump committed criminal offenses. That ain't nothing.
I mean, just to be clear, the thing I just keep not being able to understand is Michael Cohen went to jail for this crime. So we know that a crime was committed because a man went to jail for him.
Right.
And this indictment is whether or not Trump is responsible for all of that specific
whether he was
crime.
part of it, or whether Michael Cohen said, you know what I'm going to do? Out of the goodness of my heart, I'm going to take out a home equity loan.
Right.
And I'm going to spend $130,000 of borrowed money to shut Stormy Daniels up so she doesn't say things that will damage Donald Trump's candidacy. And then, out of the goodness of Donald Trump's heart, there is what we call a Google nope, right? That I stole that from, I think, Dave Barry. That has you can Google the goodness of Donald Trump's heart, and it will appear nowhere on the internet. That's a Google.
No way.
That's a Google nope, right? The goodness of Donald Trump's heart, because he's such a generous man. He said, Michael, I want to give you $130,000, even though I'm not part of the hush money payoff. I'm just a good guy and I want to do it. Generosity, thy name is Donald Trump. Give me a flippin' break. Of course, Donald Trump is criminally involved in the hush money conspiracy. And you know what, Pete? The only thing that has ever stood between us and a conviction of Donald Trump is a damn indictment of Donald Trump. Because once you make these arguments to a jury, 12 common sense folks sitting in a jury box, they're going to be like, come on now, when do we get to vote guilty?
Oh, I hope you're right.
I am right about this, Pete. 30 years with my feet in the well of courtrooms in front of juries. I'm right about this.
That's why I'm wearing my Justice Matters button. Get yours, everybody.
Love it, my bald-headed brother.
How about this? This attorney, one of Trump's attorneys, he's got so many attorneys. They come, they go. He has filed a motion to quash in the Georgia case, the one you mentioned, Fonnie Wills's case, where he asked for you get a few more votes. And the motion, on the record, everybody knows the case I'm talking about. And apparently it's because that one juror, that kind of eccentric girl, went out and talked. So this lawyer has filed a motion to quash. The lawyer himself looks a lot like Count Chocula. What does this mean? Is it going to succeed? Is Count Chocula's motion to quash going to succeed?
The only question is, will he be sanctioned for filing it because it is frivolous? Let me tell you what a motion to quash is. Most often we see motions to quash when the prosecutor subpoenas somebody and the witness who has been subpoenaed through his lawyer or her lawyer says, I think this is an unlawful subpoena, so I'm going to ask the judge to say we don't have to comply because it's unenforceable. It's illegal. I'm going to file a motion to quash or squash the subpoena. That is what a motion to quash is. They filed a motion to quash a grand jury report. That's not a legal thing, right? Now, the grand jury report is kind of a strange procedure that they have in Georgia, but still, you can't quash it, right? It was a report that said, here's the evidence that was developed through the 75 witnesses presented to us. We've packaged it up. We've recommended that a dozen or more people be indicted. And now the regular grand jury will consider that evidence and make an independent determination about who to indict and for what. Ain't nothing to quash. So no, this motion will be denied. It will be laughed out of court. And the only question is it so frivolous? Does it lack any legal support such that the lawyer might end up being sanctioned like so many other Trump lawyers have been sanctioned.
I probably should have warned you that tonight's drinking word for this interview was quash. A lot of dead people listening. All right, finally, you did this great video, and everybody should go watch it, but tease it, because you're really ripping Kevin McCarthy and the House Republicans, who they're down at Disney at their retreat. You get to go to your retreat, they're all there, and he's instructed all of his committees to look into the Manhattan DA, do everything they can to investigate Alvin Bragg. And you say something about the 10th Amendment.
10th Amendment separates or it delineates the federal government's power and authority and the state's power and authority. And it basically says any power not specifically granted to the United States, to the federal government, is reserved for the states and the people. State prosecutors are not beholden to Congress, to politicians in Washington. They have no authority. Don't take it from me. Take it from Daniel Goldman, former federal prosecutor, now a member of Congress, who, when he saw this, said, Congress has no jurisdiction to interfere with what state prosecutors are doing, even if they do happen to be prosecuting their, political deity, Donald Trump. This is such gross and transparent abuse of power by Kevin McCarthy and Jim Jordan and Comer and the other head of the third committee that's involved here. It is such a gross and obvious abuse of power that I hope to heck somebody holds them accountable for it, because talk about weaponizing government. They have weaponized Congress to try to obstruct justice and help Donald Trump avoid prosecution.
They will not be held accountable, I'm predicting, for this.
I can't disagree with you, Pete.
I don't know where that would come from in the near future.
Insurrectionists are all the rage in Congress. They all get to sit and do what they want.
It can never, you got to say it as often as possible that insurrectionists are now serving in Congress. Oh, and a bunch of more just got arrested, right? A bunch more Oath Keepers?
Yeah, well, no, they just got convicted. This is the third Oath Keepers conspiracy trial. And the first trial was convictions, second trial convictions, third trial convictions. The Proud Boys are about to be convicted as soon as the jury starts deliberating in that case, I predict. So, and I can't give enough props to the prosecutors at the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, my people, my friends and former colleagues, and my former homicide prosecutors who are heading up these prosecution teams. Pete, they're working day and night and weekends, bringing justice to the American people. Now, I do wish the Department of Justice would start to work its way up the criminal ladder and start getting the damn suits of the insurrection, not just the boots.
Well, we have to be more patient, apparently, even with all of it. Where will you be? You're on call. If he's you'll be on MSNBC right away if he's indicted?
No, I was on call until 8 p.m., so I'm now off call, but I'm coming on with Stephanie Ruhle at 11 p.m. will be my next appearance.
All right, Bob. Well, get some rest, and I can't thank you enough for joining me here. I'm going to go quash this out for everybody else to hear.
Thanks. Good seeing you, Pete.
All right, there you go. Glenn Kirschner, how about it? Let him know that you heard him here on the show. Always, always awesome. And go follow and subscribe if you're not watching his videos on YouTube. You are missing out. Now it's time to get to my second guest of today's show, who will quickly becoming one of your favorites, Leslie of Noble Pies. Leslie Noble just tweeted, I just love your conversations with David Rothkopf. I do as well. He, of course, is a foreign policy expert, is the CEO of the Rothkopf Group, which is a media company. You can listen to his podcast, Deep State Radio. Always, always great. Follow him on Twitter, DJ Rothkopf. Get his new book, American Resistance, the inside story of how the deep state saved the nation. Of course, read him at the Daily Beast. And, well, I think that's enough, right? That's enough. I mean, he's done everything. I could read his whole bio, but check it out in the show notes. Ladies and gentlemen, time for little Rothkopf, David Rothkopf, that is.
Got him. Wanted to talk to him today, and I'm so glad that he was able to join me. Rothkopf, David, David. Welcome back. Hi.
Hi, Dominic, Pete.
Yeah, that's right. Very happy to see you, and thank you very much for joining me. There's a lot to discuss with you. I just want to say that I think, based on what I've seen, I feel like the 20th anniversary of the Iraq War has been undercovered. I don't know what that means, how much time or resources a media outlet is supposed to dedicate to it. And granted, Monday was the technical, I guess, anniversary of the invasion. But I wanted to start by talking with you about 20 years. Of course, you covered that, wrote all about it, have lots of thoughts about it. But do you think it's been rightly covered? Do you have feelings on that even at all?
I don't think it is. I think your instinct is same as mine, which is I think more could have been done about it. It was a catastrophe of the first order, a bad policy decision followed by bad execution, followed by war crimes. It's like a real train wreck of policy, and the worst foreign policy series of decisions and events in American history. And I'm tempted to say in modern American history, but we didn't do foreign policy really before the beginning of the 20th century. And so since that period of time, it was the worst decision. And what's more, it's had terrible knock-on effects, not just, war that cost trillions, but then there was the war in Afghanistan that cost trillions, and fighting two wars at once. You couldn't win either of them. And you ended up, we started thinking, oh my God, it might have cost $3 trillion. Now we maybe think maybe it cost $6 trillion, but the opportunity cost, where that money could have gone to education or investment or building chip factories or helping poor people around the world so that nobody was ever starving again.
Investing in renewable energy research so that we don't have to fight wars over oil.
Anything, absolutely anything at all. and we didn't do that. And our standing as a nation tumbled. And then, Bush leaves and Obama comes in, and his reaction is, I'm not doing anything. I'm not taking any risks, more or less, because I'm not going to do anything like Bush. And so then we have 8 years of kind of middling foreign policy. And then, Trump is affected by this whole thing. And, Joe Biden's the first guy who sort of got back up and said, okay, let's evaluate things on the merits. So we had 20 years of bad policy. Now, having said that, I just want, your question made me think of one thing, which is, I find the news curious all the time.
Yeah.
And this is a perfect example of it, because the main news story of the week is Trump.
Right.
And is Trump going to be arrested? And that, of course, has been covered idiotically. Is this a big crime, a little crime? Should we be afraid? Is arresting Trump going to energize, his base? All sorts of crazy stuff. Of course, getting arrested is a bad thing. He deserves to be arrested for this. His base isn't what it used to be. And this isn't a big story. Meanwhile, and this is my point, the IPCC issues a report yesterday that says, that within 10 years, we're going to cross a threshold that's going to lead to constant disasters for the planet, and we won't be able to fix it. And this has been the big looming issue, and primarily for economic reasons, but also for reasons of apathy. We haven't addressed it. And this is climate catastrophe, planetary catastrophe, and by far the biggest story of the week. We haven't covered it.
Washington Post headline, UN climate change report, catastrophic warming will claim lives without action. CNBC, world's top climate scientists issue survival guide for humanity and call for major course correction. Fun headlines. I think that I think you played down a little bit the arrest of a former president, saying it's not a big story. However,
I'm saying compared to this, and also what I was going to say is you have Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin meeting for 3 days in Moscow, which is a very big deal. And you have the 20th anniversary, which is a very big deal. And there's no balance at all. I'm just agreeing with you. There is not the proper balance among all these stories in the cover.
I think there's so much of this kind of legal analysis and predictions of what might happen, and legal experts going live and saying, here, the plane is moving to New York. And the only real thing that matters for a lot of time, if any, is will there be violence from protesters? The answer to that is no, according to everybody who's watching the dark webs.
It's like there's not going to be violence. First of all, Trump crowds have gotten smaller and smaller over the past 2 years. Trump crowds were never that big to begin with. They were big enough to cause a problem on January 6th, but that was sort of the apotheosis of this idiotic movement.
Yeah.
And they're going to get smaller and smaller. He's over, folks. He's over. And, Georgia and another New York case.
By that, are you predicting he won't be the nominee?
He will not be the nominee.
Oh, wow. I thought most people thought that he still would be the nominee, even if he was
Most people do. But I, who have a unblemished record over the course of the past 25 years of being wrong about politics, I'm willing to stick my neck out because I've got nothing to lose.
Yes, I've also never been right about such predictions, which is why I put a lot of money into my prediction into Pompeo being the nominee. But let me get back to, and let's not get dragged down into Trump land, because I want to get back to 20th anniversary. And the thing that, I covered so many of I interviewed so many of the people, I should say, from veterans to journalists to foreign policy experts and so on. And I was really just cared so much and thought so much about it. So I get pretty upset when I see things kind of being rewritten. I wonder if 20 years you look back at some of that things are being rewritten, that I hear a lot of there wasn't much of a protest against it. Americans weren't against it. I'm like, millions of people were in the streets was my recollection. What are you seeing or concerned about maybe not being told the truth or being rewritten in history?
Look, the polling data at the time was in favor of it for a short period. And then it started to go against it when it appeared that it was going to be endless and pointless. There were a lot of people who supported it, Democrats who supported it, Republicans who supported it. There were even some people who supported it, I believe, in the Bush administration in good faith. And you've heard maybe Richard Haas from the Council on Foreign Relations, who was in there, talk about, that it wasn't so much a question about lying about whether Iraq had weapons of mass destruction as it was a question of believing the wrong thing. I don't know. We'll never know the answer to that. There were certainly efforts by the vice president to put his thumb on the scale. We know that. And there was certainly not sufficient evidence to warrant taking this action, because if you didn't know, then, you don't do this. But one of the things that I think we need to be careful of is conflating the various steps in this process. Saddam Hussein was a bad guy. The Middle East would have been better without Saddam Hussein. Having said that, the United States supported Saddam Hussein for a long time as a counterbalance to Iran. So we saw a use for him, and we turned on that. We ignored that fact all too quickly. But it was really everything that followed after acknowledging that he was a bad guy that was wrong. We were overreacting to September 11th. We were overreacting to the global terrorist threat. We were conflating the terrorist threat with the Saddam Hussein threat, which there was no connection between the two of those. And then we conducted an illegal war badly. And so every passing year, something worse would happen, So invading was bad. Killing a lot of civilians was bad. And, 600,000 to 800,000 Iraqis, we don't know what the number is, died because of what we did. And, frankly, if the United States had a shred of consistency in its policies, we'd be in the International Criminal Court. And members of the Bush administration would have warrants put out for them, and they would be under arrest.
Hear, hear.
Because if any other country did what we did in Iraq and killed 600,000 to 800,000 innocent people just going about their lives, who were killed because of political and bad decisions in Washington, they would deserve that punishment. But then, that's not to speak of Abu Ghraib. That's not to speak of policies that ended up unleashing ISIS.
Yeah.
It's not to speak of, our lack of calculation with regard to leaving a void in Iraq for Iranian influence. It's not to speak of how badly we conducted what was going on in Afghanistan. This was cascading mistakes, not just one mistake.
And you said it, but just to kind of, I think the worst outcome was radicalizing or at least creating an unfavorable look or view of America and Americans as a result in the Muslim world, the Arab world. And I'm obviously sweeping generalizations. Some people were happy about it, obviously. But when you saw the torture, when you saw even just, American Marines going into people's homes and putting black bags over their head and going through their drawers. And I've heard these kind of stories from veterans themselves. When you think about the soldier suicide and the mortal injury and all of it, I just want to add that we could talk about the consequences for a long time. And I'm glad that's what I wanted to do with you for at least a little bit. But the next question would be, what does it lead to in terms of American public opinion about, say, supporting the Ukrainians in their war against Russia and trusting in the media or trusting in the military establishment or government for future decisions when it comes to foreign policy, much less conflict?
Well, I think it clearly colors that. As I said, I think the mistakes in Iraq and Afghanistan paralyzed in some key respects the Obama administration. They didn't act as they should have against Assad, for example, in Syria. The United States is not the world's policeman. The United States should not be responding to every crisis in the world. But like other countries, we have national interests and we have moral obligations. And there are times when intervention might be warranted. But in the immediate aftermath of the Iraq war, there was a real strong disinclination to act on any of them. Just like, by the way, in the case of the Iraq war, in the immediate aftermath of September 11th, there was a desire to go whack somebody.
Right.
A national desire to go whack somebody, which was misplaced. And now we see other consequences of this. There are people in the United States. In fact, bizarrely, the Republican Party, once the champions of these kind of interventions, once party that sold itself as a national security party, contains a substantial chunk of people, including their two leading presidential contenders, their leading media outlet, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, who are all speaking out against supporting a Democratic friend that is under attack from Russia in Europe, which, if that friend fell, the next step would be Georgia, Moldova, the Baltics, Poland, Czech. I mean, this is not, like the domino theory. This is not some debatable nonsense. The Russians are already plotting to take Moldova. The Russians are plotting to take Belarus. The Russians have talked about going into Ukraine and are acting on something. And so the stability of Europe, which is vital to us, is at stake. There should be no question about this kind of thing. It'll be interesting to see how it colors decisions regarding Taiwan.
Yeah, it's already affecting the presidential campaign. We can get to that in a minute. But I want to ask you, make sure I ask you, you just wrote a piece recently about Jimmy Carter being a good foreign policy president, and I'm sure you saw Peter Baker's story this week in the New York Times. A lot of people are talking about that, but apparently a lot of other people have been talking about what they knew about this before, including H.W. Brands, my friend Jonathan Alter. But this was new because a certain person came out and talked to Peter Baker at the New York Times, Barnes is his name, as a result of basically he's saying, Jimmy Carter's at the end of his life, and I've always been holding on to this piece of information, and I want to tell somebody. But it did seem like a piece of the puzzle that was fitting in to complete the argument or solidify the argument that a lot of people believed that Ronald Reagan's people, or Reagan maybe himself, although apparently there's no evidence of that, wanted the Iranians and back-channeled the Iranians, hold on to the hostages until after the election, we'll give you a better deal. And apparently the day Reagan was sworn in, the hostages were released, which created a lot of question for people who were paying attention to that time, according to what I've read this week. What are your thoughts on this New York Times piece and what it says about Jimmy Carter, the Iranian hostages, and the presidential election of 1980?
One, it was a good piece, very interesting piece. Two, you're absolutely right, by the way. Jonathan Alter's book, goes into much greater detail on this, as did a book a long time ago by Gary Sick, who worked for Carter.
Oh, right. Yep.
Go into much greater detail on this. Barnes ought to be ashamed of himself. I wanted Jimmy Carter to know this before he died. What bullshit is that? If this happened the way that he describes it, this is a crime to subvert an American election. And, you just have to imagine for a moment that Jimmy Carter wins a second term. Ronald Reagan is no longer a factor in American politics. And we go in a completely different direction as a country, including not into 40 years of growing inequality in our system, which is probably the biggest social problem that we face. So screw him. I'm not, he's not absolved. Having said that, it's an outrage. People knew it was an outrage, and it fits a pattern. Richard Nixon did the same thing with the solution of the Vietnam War in 1968.
Yes,
and the whole,
so craven.
Right? And so let's go through the list. Since 1968, the Republican presidents that have been elected are Richard Nixon, not Gerald Ford because he wasn't elected, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, who was only elected as essentially Reagan's third term, right? Didn't sort of win again in his own right, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump. Nixon stole the election. Reagan stole the election. George W. Bush, through the Florida contesting of the election and the Supreme Court decision that didn't allow for a real recount, stole the election. Donald Trump worked with the Russians the first time around and lost both elections and sought to steal the last election. Nixon was nearly impeached, had to resign in disgrace. Reagan should have been impeached for Iran-Contra, which, if anything, was worse and involved lying to Congress, and many of the people on his team paid a legal price for that. George W. Bush, for what we were talking about earlier, could easily have faced criminal prosecution for war crimes in Iraq, as could members of his administration. And of course, Trump is a festival of crime. So, this is 50 years of American history in which one political party cheats, lies, steals, doesn't play fair, and focuses their entire agenda on giving more power and more money to fewer and fewer people.
Very well said. Very well said. I wish I had a sound effect for that, because that's quite a timeline of facts that you just went through. You said stole the election, Reagan and Nixon. And do you mean stole, or do you mean that they did things with the Vietnam War and with the hostages that manipulated public opinion that were just so craven that it
Yeah, it's against the law. Just, there's something called the Logan Act. It's against the law for people to conduct foreign policy instead of the U.S. government, in the place of the U.S. government. And both cases, they sought and effectively succeeded in changing where public opinion would be on election day by pursuing an independent foreign policy that included sort of will be better to deal with on the come, promises. That's a theft of an election in my book, and it's grotesquely irresponsible. And I'll just give you one example of that, and that is, imagine you were a fucking hostage in Tehran, living as a prisoner, and in fact, in this bar, I don't know, one of these people, one of the stories that just came out recently, they said Carter went to visit the hostages when the hostages were released, and the hostages were all angry at him because they thought he hadn't tried hard enough to get them out. Imagine how they would feel about Ronald Reagan, who said, yeah, keep him a little longer. Keep him a little longer. I'll deal with you better, which of course, he didn't do.
Well said again. All right, let me change gears and ask you about China. You touched on it earlier in terms of Iraq and what it forecasts and what it all means. But you just written a piece at the Daily Beast about it. What Washington is getting wrong about dealing with China. Really interesting piece there that people should read. But yesterday, or I guess for a couple days, the president of China and the president of Russia, they're hanging out. They're playing some cards or whatever. I don't know what they do together. They probably go into like a sauna or a salt bath. They probably bathe. They do something. And then as a result, or in reaction to, at least that's what some are insinuating, the Japanese president goes to Ukraine and visits Zelensky. What is happening in Asia?
First of all, I find that your first reaction of the meeting, the summit of these two people, is to imagine them soapy and naked in hot water.
Well, I don't know that they're soapy, but like I imagine them steaming, like definitely shirtless and like steaming like mafia bosses, or like that's it. There's nobody can listen to them. And
like that scene in Eastern Promises.
Yes. Well, because it's hard to listen in on their conversation in there. All they got is the two guys, the shirtless, hairless men. That's how I imagine them with an interpreter, maybe a small interpreter.
I have to say, it's an image I could easily have done without.
Okay.
But having said
listeners demand it from me.
Yeah, no, that's what they've come here for. But having said that, this is an important meeting, but the objective of each guy is different, right? The objective of Vladimir Putin is to get a warm hug from his mommy because things are not going well. Okay. And he wants to look like he has some kind of support in the world. And, he's going to try to use his incredible powers of charm, of which he has zero, to persuade Xi Jinping, who has no interest in Vladimir Putin at all, to give him a little more help and cover in Ukraine. Xi Jinping is there for entirely separate reasons. He's there because, A, Russia's been screwing up, and he's trying to put as good a face of it as possible. B, for his purposes of trying to be the most influential alternative to the United States in the world, he needs to have some supporters. He had bet on Russia. Russia has screwed up serially. He's trying to do some damage control on all of that. And, he's in the midst of something of a foreign policy offensive right now. He's done this deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. He's got a peace plan for Ukraine. He's going to go to Ukraine. You watch. He's going to interact with the Ukrainians in some way. And he's going to have some leverage that we're not really thinking about here. And the leverage he's going to have is it's going to cost $750 billion to rebuild Ukraine. And we're not going to pony it all up. So who's going to pony up the money to rebuild Ukraine? And it could be, quite interesting in terms of the outcome of this war if the Chinese and the Saudis and a bunch of other people who didn't get involved, who are not lined up with us completely, step in and do the rebuilding of that country, or do a chunk of the rebuilding of that country. But in any event, they both have very, very different objectives. Putin is not going to get China to stand up and say, here's a blank check.
Right.
That's very clear. They have not been willing to do that. China is in it for China. And if you look at some of the statements that Xi Jinping has made, they're like, China supports China's interests. China will try to advance the world system. We want to maintain, territorial, sovereignty and all this other kind of stuff. In fact, he said a whole bunch of things that if he actually believed them would lead him to oppose Putin. But behind the scenes, the main message Xi Jinping is sending Putin on a regular basis is when Putin says, I need you to do this, and Xi Jinping says nothing.
Well, we'll see what happens with that relationship. What about the U.S. relationship? What Washington is getting wrong about dealing with China? You wrote this whole piece about it. Really interesting. Are we in a Cold War with China?
I think a lot of people, in fact, I think the majority of people in Washington think we are, or advocate that we are. They see China as an enemy. China
I have to interrupt just because I have to get my dad has been saying this for 15 years. Now, my dad sold insurance and he's a ski instructor. He's not a foreign policy expert, but I've been arguing with him saying, and I've even been mocking him at times about this view. And he's been relentless. We're at war with China. So I don't know if I need to give him this.
Well, let's come up with some ways to support your argument, because you're absolutely right and he's absolutely wrong. China is multiple things to us. They are Economically, they are a competitor. Politically, they are a rival on a number of issues, small number of issues, South China Sea, Taiwan. They may even be an adversary. But this is not the Cold War, where if Russia gains, we lose. If we gain, they lose. It's not a zero-sum game. We have 70,000 U.S. companies in China. We get $500 to $600 billion a year in imports from China. We send several $100 billion a year of imports to China. Our economies are completely interdependent on each other. There are a whole host of questions in the world that cannot be solved without cooperation between the United States and China. Climate, which we mentioned earlier, is one of them. Arms control, North Korea, pandemic control, dealing with the emerging nations of the world, a whole host of issues where we have to find a way to work with them. We have to, we were in this position before. I'm going to turn the page back to when you were very young in the early years of the Eisenhower administration.
Yes, I was a little boy.
Yeah, you were just, you were in college or something.
Well, I was a small boy.
Small boy. And as the Cold War was starting, there was a big movement in the Republican Party to say, let's confront the Russians now. John Foster Dulles, bunch of people.
Right.
Let's confront the Russians now. Eisenhower said, not so fast. And he came up with a whole scheme, which I could go into, but I'm not going to go into, to sort of let everybody think he was weighing the choices. And then he came to the choice. No, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to contain Russia. We're going to prepare ourselves for the threats. But we're going to invest in ourselves. We're going to build highways. He created the whole system for financing venture capital in this country, created the big push around science and tech education in this country. And we're going to push back on the people who are pushing this enemy narrative. And he did that in his farewell address. And I strongly urge, I know this is not the kind of thing your listener wants to do on an average day, but it's short. Go read Eisenhower's farewell address. Eisenhower's farewell address is the address in which he warns against the military-industrial complex and talks about how this group in Washington has too much control over our lives. And it's a theme he returned to often.
You may be wrong about that, by the way. Friday night, I'm sure a lot of listeners did something similar. I personally sat Friday night, I had a drink, and I watched Robert McNamara's speech after he wrote his book about all of his regrets, because I had just watched this old movie, Path to War, which is about President Johnson's run up to Vietnam War. So I think a lot of people will go back and listen to the Eisenhower.
Well, they should. They should. And if they are like you, they should definitely do that. I think you'll find that Eisenhower got it right.
Right.
That what we need to do is, if we believe in competition, if we believe in ourselves, if we believe our system is a better system than their system, then invest in our system. Invest in education, invest in science and tech, invest in research and development, invest as Biden is doing in our highways and in our infrastructure. Take the steps we need to take in order to remain competitive. Prepare, but let's not be crazy, because this military-industrial complex is still there. They're the ones that said in 2001 that couple hundred people living in caves posed an existential threat to the U.S.
Oh,
they didn't, but they got $6 trillion. Now, we talk about 6 trillion or 4 trillion or 8 trillion or whatever it was as an abstract number, but that money went somewhere.
Yeah. I remember Joseph Stiglitz wrote a book back in 2007.
And when he wrote it, it was 3 trillion.
Was that right? I wasn't. Yeah.
But the point is, and Joe Stiglitz has been right about a huge number of things.
Yeah.
But the point is, that money went to somebody. For somebody, it was a war and a nightmare. For somebody, it was a mansion and a yacht and a house in the country.
That's right. That's right.
And for all of Americans, it was a school that didn't get built, a hospital that didn't get built, an investment in a cancer cure that didn't take place. That money is perhaps one of the 2 greatest tragedies of the Iraq War, the other being the lives that were lost. But that's what this military industrial complex, or, John McCain used to refer to it as the military-industrial congressional triangle.
Sure.
Want us to do. They want us to spend. We're already spending over $800 billion a year. They want us to direct it all to China. They want an 800 ship Navy, which is ludicrous. They want to keep building carrier battle groups. If there's ever a global war, the carrier battle groups will be at the bottom of the ocean. They want to keep building, planes that cost a couple $100 million each that are flown by pilots, even though there's no reason to have a plane or more plane flown by a pilot now. They want to invest in expensive platforms and complicated systems, even though, as we've seen in Ukraine, drones, cyber, inexpensive options often are quite effective.
Right.
And they want the United States to continue to spend 3 or 4 times as much as China and more than the next 12 nations on Earth on defense to prepare for a war that we shouldn't fight. And I will add that when you get into the mode of enmity with China, you did it. Then when you have a conflict over something like Taiwan, you look at it differently. And there is more of a predisposition towards escalation. And that can lead to accidental conflict. And between two superpowers, that would be a big mistake.
And enmity.
Enmity.
The state or feeling of being actively opposed or hostile to someone or something. For those of you who didn't know, I obviously knew what that meant. I use it all the time. But you're saying the policy now, getting back to your piece, what are we?
Your question is, I'm sure it's going to go back and say, what kind of soap do you think Xi Jinping uses in the steam bath?
Oh, I imagine he uses probably
like some scented soap, like a jasmine scented.
Yeah.
Something nice.
Something classically Chinese. Some highbrow Chinese soap.
Make him smell good.
Yeah, I bet he smells amazing. I would imagine.
He does. Everybody knows that.
Getting back to the piece though, what are we getting wrong?
Well, the piece, what we're getting wrong is that if you poll a bunch of people in Washington right now, they'll say China's an enemy. We got to spend all this money. We've got to, treat them in that way. Let's not have trade deals with them. Let's not talk to them about climate talks. We're missing sort of half our policy, right? Yeah, sure. Be strong. Be prepared. They're a little expansionist in their neighborhood, although they've never been globally expansionist. Sure, be prepared for that. But where's the trade policy? Where's the economic policy? Where's the policy of exchange? Where's the policy of us collaborating on issues that we need to collaborate on? Where's the effort? And by the way, and this is a final point, I once sat with a very, very senior U.S. government official, and they said, well, those Chinese, they want to be the most influential country in the world, and we can't let that happen. And it's like, well, of course they want to be the most influential country in the world. All countries want to be the most influential country in the world. For all of human history, until the year of 1835, China was the largest economy in the world. They've been around 5,000 years. There's 1.4 billion of them. We want to be the most influential country in the world. Our job is not to deny others being number one. Our job, if we believe in our system, is to compete for it, to have a better system, to have a better answer, to lead by example. And we don't have the self-confidence to live up to the superpower role that we feel we're entitled to.
Love it. Love all of it. But you know what I love the most is that you made sure to mention the news from the IPCC, because I'm going to continue to talk about that here with all the right folks, as it can be sometimes
as the water rises.
Yeah,
as you will be sitting there and it'll be to your waist and it'll then be to your neck.
I mean, I'd probably be more accurate that it'll be at my daughter's waist and neck, but
Well,
true.
We'll see. How high above sea level are you?
We are supposed to go to Venice this summer.
Good luck. Good luck.
You think it'll be open?
If you go to Venice the wrong times, a lot of Venice is under. I've been there when it's like a lot of it's underwater.
We only go at the right times. We know people.
You know people.
Yeah.
Well, you're sophisticated. You're You're one of those global elites, aren't you?
Well, to be fair, yeah. I mean, when I go to Venice, I call up a guy named Giuseppe. I say, control the water levels. We'll be there tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, as a Jew, I just call George Soros. He takes care of all this stuff.
Soros! Dave Rothkopf, thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete.
All right, there he goes, everybody. David Rothkopf. Follow him on Twitter at DJ Rothkopf. He's epic over there, very prolific. Read him at the Daily Beast. Get his book. Listen to Deep State Radio. And please let him know that you heard him here on Stand Up. Always love when he joins me. Same thing for the great Glenn Kirschner. Let him know that you heard him here. Please give the podcast a rating and review on Spotify and iTunes. And subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/standupwithpete. Thank you to Odessa Son. Thank you to the great Pete Coe, John Carroll, singing to us each and every day. That's all I've got for you today. I will talk to you tomorrow right here on Stand Up. Go be the change that you want to see in the world. Love you guys. Bye-bye. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.